maybe for those of our listeners who are not quite aware of what we're talking about, there's some really weird or strange statement in Genesis 6, that a lot of this is based around. That the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they came in, they procreated with them, and the heroes of old, and that's really all it says in there in Genesis 6. And there have been sort of a lot of ideas about it. One idea is that it was actually angelic beings, and this is substantiated with the book of Enoch. Angelic beings came in, they procreated with the daughters of men, and they created some hybrids, some giants.
Okay, so you've got these fallen angels that came in, and they obviously took some form that would be conducive to exactly what they wanted to do, which is they wanted to mate with the women. They wanted to birth offspring, so they took some form conducive to this. The product of that union was not only giants, and it's commonly how it gets interpreted, but was all sorts of abominations. That's what the text is telling you. In fact, the most precise definition, from my view, of the word Nephilim is creatures made from man. Getting into Exodus, getting into Joshua. What you're reading is that there were not only giants in the land, that there were not only other things that were there that apparently are strange. But there were certainly giants, and you've got records of this from all across the globe. You've got bones for them. Brian, you've been working with these skulls for about how long?
About 4 years, I would say. Seriously, for 3.
Okay. So, and you're actually out there at a museum. So do you run the museum, or are you just involved with the museum out there?
Well, there are actually 2. There's one at Paracas, which is on the coast, south of Lima.
Okay.
That has a collection of about 40 skulls. And then I'm also associated with a little museum outside of Cusco, which is where I am now. And they have what some regard as being an alien or alien hybrid, because it's very, very unique and very strange. So there's only 2 museums that I work with.
Let's walk through one skull, for example, an elongated skull. What you're telling me is that these can vary in size, and some of them can get up to, I think I'd heard you said 30% larger.
Yes.
Welcome to the Paracas History Museum here in Paracas, Peru, just south of Lima. Today I'm going to show you the difference between the Paracas ancient people and other people who have lived in this area. Now, this person is an example of Inca. Not Inca as in royal Inca, but Inca as in the time period of the Inca. This is a normal shaped skull, and this person's cranial volume was 1,200 cubic centimeters, which is an average human. Now this is an example of cranial deformation. The volume of this skull is 1,100 cubic centimeters. So again, basically normal. And you can tell, obviously, the deformation by the way it was flattened this way. The string was wrapped around this way, possibly a board or some kind of material this way when it was a child, and the flattening was done in order to create this shape, which was desirable by these people. Now, another clue here is you see 3 cranial plates, which is normal. Your skull has that. The frontal, and then the 2 parietal plates. Now, the Inca one has that as well. It's a normal feature in a human being. And then we come to the Paracas. And this skull is very different from the other 2 I've shown you in many different ways. One thing is in terms of plates, there are only two. There's one frontal and there's one parietal. There are not two parietals, only one. The volume of the skull is 1,500 cubic centimeters, so 25% larger than the Inca skull, shown as the example of what normality is. Also, the eye sockets are much larger. The nose seems to be larger. It has these two holes in the back, which are indicative of where nerves would come out of the skull to feed this part of the head. That is not a normal feature in a human being, in a normal human being.
But it's not just the size. I mean, the interesting features can apply whether the head is large or whether it's just regular or whether it looks more human size. Is that true?
Well, that's true. The thing is, the vast majority of them we know were the result of cranial deformation. It was a cultural practice that was conducted by ancient people, but there are maybe about 5% which appear to be natural looking. They don't seem to have been had their head bound or any kind of artificial means acting on the skull to change the shape. They literally look like they were born that way. The eye sockets are much larger than normal. They have huge jaws. Also, the nose shape appears to not be necessarily Native American looking. The density and thickness of the skull is greater than a normal Native American skull. And there are these two little holes in the back of the skull which appear to be where nerve endings and blood flow came out of, which is very intriguing.
There are these two holes in the back, and these aren't man-made holes. These are on all of the unusual skulls.
Exactly. The thing is that I've shown these skulls to a number of physicians, especially American physicians who've been on holiday, nurses, dentists, and they all basically, in general, they've said that these holes appear to be natural. It's not like somebody plunged something into the skull, because what we have is we have two holes here called foramen, and that's where nerves and blood flow come out to feed this part of your skull, and they seem to be exactly the same thing, but they're in the back of the skull here. The theory is that that's part of the genetics in that these people, since their head shape was naturally different, that they needed those nerve endings coming out because the size and shape of the skull was different from a normal human being.
You had beings with these features that were actually integrating or interbreeding with humans, so you almost see the features sort of become mixed with the human characteristics. Am I following that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. What appears to have happened was that there was a very small population of these royal-blooded people who were in charge of the society, and they appeared to have been naturally elongated or cone-headed, but through interbreeding with normal human beings, the cone-head or elongation characteristics started to disappear, and I think that's when the cranial deformation started. It was a way to try to retain this royal bloodline and keep these elongated skull people around, even though genetically their characteristics were disappearing.
The Book of Enoch, and I want to go through this more extensively in another video, but number one, the first thing to bear in mind about this Book of Enoch is that it's not to be held to Scripture, and I would never suggest anyone do that. But that does not mean that the Book of Enoch isn't real. And this book, why this is even a topic of discussion is because when you're dealing with Nephilim, these strange creatures that appear, this passage that almost zips by you too quick in Genesis 6, where you're reading about and the sons of God came into the daughters of men and begat giants or gigantes or Nephilim by them, and that these were there before and after the flood. So that's what the text is directly telling you. Well, Well, here you've got this book that sort of opens up and expands on this, and it does it with such clarity. And that's another topic about Enoch, is that when you're looking at pseudepigrapha texts, or texts that are basically just made up but ascribed to an author, which is what is alleged about the book of Enoch. When you're dealing with texts like that, they are loosey-goosey and all over the place. Enoch does not read like those texts.
What I have found through my research with deliverance ministry, which I've probably cast out several hundred demons by now, is that the book of Enoch fully explains what the demons actually are. Now, a lot of people are going to say that the book of Enoch is not canonical, and what they actually need to look at, though, is it is not part of the Bible, and it should not be part of the Bible, but neither is the writings of Josephus. Josephus was a historian, but yet many experts and researchers will read Scripture or go to Josephus to confirm.
That's a fantastic way to have put that, Don.
Thank you.
It's hard to tell exactly what they would have looked like when they were alive, because, of course, you need the muscle and skin and fatty tissue. But the thing is, on top of some of these skulls, there is still some of the skin remaining, because the area of Paracas is incredibly dry. It rains maybe an inch a year. So it's the perfect place for preservation or mummification. And a number of these skulls also have reddish-brown hair, which is not a Native American characteristic.
So they're separated in that way as well. Now, you're out there where a lot of these megalithic sites, and I'm not even sure what all the megalithic sites around where you're at are. Tell me which ones are out there just within your vicinity.
Well, the ones on the coast of Peru are basically made of adobe, because there is no stone. It's all sand and desert. But here, where I'm at in Cusco, it's completely, it's the Andes Mountains, so it's all rock.
Okay.
So what we have here, of course, we have Machu Picchu, but we also have incredible megalithic structures like Sacsayhuaman, which I can see from my window. And there you have stones which are they're incredibly tight-fitting without mortar. Some of them weigh 125 tons. And then there are also other major structures inside the city of Cusco which are megalithic as well, like multi-ton stones.
So you're sitting where you can see one of these sites.
Yeah, it's amazing. We got a perfect apartment to be able to view. This way I can see megalithic Cusco, and that way I can see the Andes out that side. So it's perfect.
Now, the speculation that you have, and this may be shared with others out there, if you can talk to me about it, that these megalithic sites may have been built by these folks with the unusual features, or the inspiration behind them.
Yeah, well, the thing is, conventional archaeologists believe that the Inca culture built them all between about 1200 and 1500 AD, but the trouble is the Inca only had bronze chisels and stone hammers, and the workmanship on these megalithic structures is almost technically perfect. The stones do not use concrete or mortar to stick together. It's stone against stone, and you can't fit a human hair in between. So definitely somebody had high technology at some point, and wherever we find the megalithic structures, we also find elongated skulls associated with them.
This is a very common way that the Inca would build a wall. They would shape the stone and put the stones together, and then they would put adobe mud in between as a mortar. Later, the Spanish arrived, and the Spanish would mix straw and adobe mud, and they would make walls like this, which then they would paint. On the other hand, we have that. And this is what is ascribed to the Inca. However, how in the course of 300 years do you go from this kind of building to that?
seems the most logical thing that happened was that this wall existed possibly thousands of years before the Inca existed, and they inherited this. And that is what we see today. This is the Inca Roca Wall in Cusco. It's not simply a complex construction, it's symbolic. So with this Inca Roca Wall, you see the mosaic of green andesite, which makes it up. And some say that it's because of the fact that the stone was shaped that way, that they tried to make it fit as best they could. However, it's more probable that they did this intentionally. This seam is so tight that water doesn't even penetrate it. You can see the stain where the water travels down the join but doesn't penetrate it. In other areas, you do find separation. Not here, but that is probably the result of earthquake damage that forced the stones apart. And another point is, how do you go in the course of 300 years from this megalithic way of building with a stone or stones of this scale, and then again within 300 years previous you have that? How can you have a change in construction style one way or the other, either forwards or backwards from this style to that?
There is some correlation between head size and brain power. And
there definitely should be. And the interesting thing about the elongated skulls is that the contact between the left and right hemispheres would have been different from a normal human being. So it's possible that they had increased brain activity between the creative and the intellectual aspects of thinking.
Well, there certainly would be no argument. Am I correct in this statement? There would be no argument with engineers or the archaeological community that at bare minimum, those sites out there, even if human built, are feats of engineering that would require that are bedazzling in scope.
Yeah, the thing is that because I run tours here on occasion, I bring down engineers, stonemasons, and geologists from Europe, the United States, Canada, and Australia, and all of them are completely overwhelmed when they see these. They can't understand how they could have possibly been done by a Bronze Age culture. They, in general, they talk about the necessity of there having to have been some kind of high technology involved in doing the shaping and fitting and even moving of some of these stones. Some of the blocks that weigh 125 tons were moved 40 to 50 miles from the quarry. And how could you have done that if you were a so-called primitive culture?
They looked upon that the daughters of men were fair. This was something that they couldn't have in the place where they were. And they're already rebellious angels. Enoch is taking that a step forward, and he's saying they made a pact one with another to go in and do this heinous sin, or this horrible sin, this wicked sin. Indeed, we will be punished for this greatly. We will all pay the penalty of a great sin. So they bound themselves by mutual imprecations. Right? They bound themselves together and decided to go in. I've got a picture here of one of these skulls.
And yes, I should be wearing gloves, but the museum ran out of them.
Don't think that the common person really realized and gripped onto, because these pictures are online. There's so many pictures online of different things, and of course, much of the things that you run across online are frauds, and so it becomes common nature to be skeptical of what's out there. Sure. But the truth is that these really are genuine artifacts that we're talking about.
Here are the nostrils of a normal skull. You see how they go straight through to the because they are air passages.
And then this one. If there are air passages, they're not in the same place as this.
And are available for people to look at and examine. Can you share with me a little about what you do out there in Paracas? You take tour groups through to look at these sites. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. My wife and I do this. It's not full time. We do it about 30% of the time. And then I also spend time in the museum, with my computer doing research for my books, etc. And so when people come into the museum, I'm, an active member of showing the general public what we have on display.
I think that's incredible, and there are scheduled tours on your website for people to come and make arrangements to come and look at. And it's not just the elongated skulls. I was looking on your pages, and it looks like you actually take them through a vast array of different things and walk them through these different sites. Is that right? Am I on that?
Yeah, it's the thing is that Peru and Bolivia as well are so major in terms of historical Native American activity. The number of different cultures that lived here is astounding, and the number of artifacts and constructions and other things that they left behind is in the millions.
But the main question is, are we even looking at a human being?
These are amazing sites too, and I would in fact, I look forward to coming out there and taking one of these tours with you, and I would recommend that. I've looked on your pages, and I tell you, those sites just look incredible. I can only imagine standing out there is more mesmerizing. And to think that you've got these unusual skulls popping up around these sites really is no shortage of an interesting feature, man.
That's true.
You live in Phoenix now, but you were a police officer in, was it New Jersey for 25 years or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a retired police detective from New Jersey. I moved out to Arizona here right after I retired.
Did you spend some time with the MUFON folks for a little bit doing investigations, and also the cold case guys?
Yeah, while I was a police officer, I also became a MUFON investigator because the UFOs interested me a little bit, but I did a lot of research on my own with that. I investigated, I believe it was 2 cases for MUFON, and then I moved on from there. After I retired, I moved to Arizona, and I went with the Maricopa County Cold Case Posse out here.
Ordinary, everyday people that this has happened to, and it can happen to anybody. I didn't want to believe that it happened to me, but it did.
Joyce Ahrens and her family believe that what happened to them was not an isolated incident. One highly controversial study conducted by the Roper Poll suggests that hundreds of thousands, even millions of Americans, have memories that indicate that they may have been kidnapped by aliens. Abduction researchers believe these abductions happen generation after generation, as this family from West Plains, Missouri can attest. Their story starts one evening in the fall of 1976, in the presumed safety of their home.
I remember just lying there, trying to relax. I'd opened my eyes, I seen a red light flowing across the ceiling, which it almost looked like the Aurora Borealis.
Dan and Joyce Ahrens say the room was dark except for the unusual light, which they describe as about 4 or 5 feet in diameter. They say it hovered over the baby's crib at the foot of their bed where their 1-year-old daughter Heather slept. Dan says that when he tried to get up, he found himself immobilized.
That was the most frightening feeling I guess I've ever had in my whole life, is not being able to move.
I was screaming for him to help me because I couldn't move. And I didn't know that he was paralyzed too. And we both sat up in the bed at the same time. And I said, "What the hell was that?"
The incident was over in what seemed like an instant. The baby was standing up in her crib looking dazed but unharmed. Dan and and Joyce thought they had just shared a scary dream. That is until 1992, 16 years later. Dan, a computer technician, was working at his keyboard when suddenly he was seized by panic.
I immediately thought I was having a heart attack because I started sweating real bad. My ears were ringing. It was a real tight feeling in my head.
Dan was rushed to the emergency room where doctors ran tests and ordered x-rays. When the results were in, they concluded that Dan had suffered an anxiety attack and sent him home, but the symptoms persisted.
To see him like that was devastating. He couldn't leave the house. He was so scared.
After 6 weeks of constant fear, Dan sat down in front of the TV trying to relax. He turned on a movie that happened to be about alien abductions. Dan experienced a sudden revelation.
There was one part in that movie that this little creature, whatever, was kind of peeking out from around the door, and it was in the dark and the shadows, and everything. And I immediately my heart started racing, and I just kind of completely went out of it again.
Dan wondered, was his anxiety somehow related to the subject of the movie? He later chanced upon another television show about alien abductions and watched an interview with therapist John Carpenter, the National Director of Abduction Research for the Mutual UFO Network. Dan immediately contacted Carpenter for help.
He suffered from a panic disorder at that point in time, and he had flashbacks and nightmarish images of these beings, but didn't understand what was going on and needed some relief.
Dan agreed to an on-camera hypnosis session with Carpenter, during which he revisited that memorable night in 1976, the night he saw the red light over the baby's crib. This time, under hypnosis, he remembers more. He recalls cowering in the corner of his bed as he watched alien beings take his daughter Heather from her crib.
He went to the crib.
He went to the crib.
Picked her up. I can't move.
You can't move. You don't have any control over what's happening to you. What do you see happening now?
I took her.
He took her.
Under separate hypnosis, Dan's wife Joyce recalled the same sequence of events. They both say little beings marched them outside, and together the family was floated onto a spaceship.
I never wanted it to happen to my children. I didn't realize until later that it had. But when they took her, I couldn't do anything.
Heather, now 22 and married, remembers a series of abductions beginning in childhood when she was forced to play telepathic games with the aliens.
How do you play the game?
If I pick up that one, he'll let me go.
What are you feeling?
I want to go home.
What does he tell you about that?
If I pick it up, he'll let me go.
Did you feel like it was demonic, or did you feel like it was spiritual prior to looking
Well, there's a funny thing. I actually believed in aliens and UFO flying saucers, although I never saw them myself. I only saw funny-looking lights. After I came out here and got involved with the Cold Case Posse, I was speaking to other researchers and investigators, and every time I would be getting somewhere with my computer, it would crash. And one investigator was a Christian, and she told me that I should pray before I start. And if I prayed before I started my research on the computer for that day, I had no problems. and that was my first experience with spiritual warfare. Now, I'd also gotten the calling to become a minister, and I've been going through seminary school. I graduated and was under the auspice of a deliverance minister, and now I was ordained and become a deliverance minister. See, what happens is when people sin, they invite demons to come in. Now, the thing with MUFON is, going back to that, what I was investigating was there were several reports out there that was talked amongst the investigators where people actually stopped abductions by saying, in the name of Jesus Christ, leave me alone, and instantly it was stopped. And this is a well-known fact, it's just not publicized. And in some abductions, there was also sulfur smell, which is similar to what you would find with demons. So now you're getting to where they're starting to come together. And one thing you got to realize as an investigator, sometimes 2 and 2 does not make 4. 2 and 2 make 22. 2 plus 2 make 4. So you really have to, look into this.
Behind me on the screen is Joe Jordan. He's 2 seminars in Roswell, a variety of other places on these alien abduction experiences. He's a MUFON investigator, but he was one of the first men to discover, actually through MUFON, doing case investigations, that at least one man, the initial case that he had stopped the alien abduction experiences. Totally, the aliens will apparently spit you right back into your bedroom if you can choke out the name of Jesus and begin to proclaim the name of Jesus. The entire experience behaves identically to a demonic encounter. Strangely enough, all of the instruments that are in the rooms where these aliens creep in, very much like a virus that is crawling in to take control of its host, that is generally in some way called in the being, even if they don't know they've done that, by playing with the occult, playing with New Age, loosey-goosey type of mind expansion philosophies, or just an interest in the aliens themselves, is actually sufficient enough for something to whittle its way in, and if it can get one tentacle in, then it'll get as many as it can. All of these people behind Joe Jordan, and he'll often line up, in some cases 20, 25 on their website. They've got 70 cases, or maybe more than that now, that are actually audio cases. Each one are alien abductees, many of which have been experiencing this their entire lives, or generationally experiencing the alien abductions, who have had it completely stop in the name of Jesus.
I had an opportunity to meet this lady a few years back. She had left her family. This is Joyce from the video. She left her family. She could no longer be part of all of that, but she was still searching for answers. She ended up in Florida, in my neighborhood. Imagine that.
There's one clip at this particular seminar that Joe gave that you won't see on the A&E documentary that you saw just before. The woman from that documentary found the way to stop her alien abductors, not just for herself, but for the lives of her family and her children.
So she saw my name, called me on the phone, says, "I want to talk to you. I'm an abduction experiencer, blah, blah, blah." She was all excited about being an experiencer. Well, after about 45 minutes of talking to her, I was catching in her voice, she ain't real happy. So I set up to meet with her. I said, "I'd like to talk some more with you." So we set up an appointment to meet at this little restaurant, and we met, and I started sharing with her what I had. And you know what? She freaked. I gotta go. And away she went, out the door. I thought, well, that's that. I won't see Joyce again. But you know what? I did see Joyce again.
Fascinating to me on another aspect of the alien abduction experiences is how every item in the room, when you're listening to people, whether they define it as a spaceship or another realm, or these entities can come in lots of different sort of shape-shifting dimensional forms and presentations of themselves. But no matter what it looks like, where they're pulling the people into, all of the instruments are designed for human beings. Meaning whatever it is that they're doing to the people that they're abducting is very, very important to them in terms of their little projects.
He's right, I didn't trust him because I was a devout atheist. So I didn't believe in God. Didn't want to have any part of that. I did tell Joe that I would read the testimonies that he gave me. I do try and keep my word. Whenever I give my word, I do try and keep it. So I took the testimonies and I left, and on my way home, I stopped at a red light. And I got my first vision. And in my vision that I received was a beautiful picture of the world looking from outside it. And then around it were a couple of hands with very long claws, nails, and a face that started to peer from behind it. Was absolutely hideous. And I knew right then that what he told me was true. I still didn't want to believe it, but I knew. And I knew the powers that I'd been dealing with. And I knew I was in deep trouble.
Let me go from here.
Okay.
About a week later, Joyce calls me and says, I want what you have. I had the opportunity of leading Joyce to Jesus Christ in my living room.
In terms of demons, exorcisms, and these evil spirits, you've done quite a few of these at this point.
Yeah, I've sent probably a good 200-300 demons to the pit of hell.
What did they? So you've actually gone to houses where people have called and they've and there are things happening in the house that are beyond normal.
Yeah, but that's the house itself. It's not the people. Normally, the people would come to us through deliverance service. But yeah, I've done haunted houses. The last one I did, they were getting bangs and knocks at night. They were hearing footsteps going around their beds at night. They would turn the light switch on, the light would go off. They'd have to turn it on again, and this happened like 6-7 times in a row, and then it happened, multiple times over weeks. It turns out that as I was cleansing the house and I was putting holy water throughout it in 4 corners of the house, and I was praying out loud, they had 3 dogs which were in their cages. They were barking, and whenever I mentioned the word Jesus, I would hear one of them growl. When I was done with the cleansing of the house and also with the anointing oil, I went in and I just went up to the dogs. I said, in the name of Jesus Christ, through the power of the Holy Spirit, I condemn and rebuke any demons in these dogs. I command them to come out and go straight to the pit of hell. All 3 of the dogs sat down at the same time and yawned. It was like I was watching a movie when it happened.
I want you to notice that the dog is angry at something inside the footage. This is a clip that was sent to me by Don Jeffrey, and in this particular clip, this is footage from a cell phone that was sent to Don by the family with the haunted house, and the dogs that all sat down in unison prior to him going out to that house. Apparently the woman recorded just this little touch of something that was occurring within her home, which apparently there were things going up and down the stairs and making noises that went up and down, light switches going on and off, and all sorts of craziness. But this is a little touch of what they caught on their cell phone that Don came out to respond to before all of the dogs sat down and sighed in unison. The dog's angry, and the dog's sort of as if it's barking at the owners to keep them away from something that's in the background, perhaps. It doesn't know whether it should bark at them or be kind to them, but it's nervous about something. And while we were watching the tape and talking about it, I want you to watch carefully right here. Watch the little hand pop out from under the fridge. Did you see that? And there it goes again. Now look carefully as I scroll through, just frame by frame. Look at the little hand pop out from under that fridge. Watch that shadow come out again. Right when the dog's head moves, here comes our little hand. The little hand is going to, there it goes. There's nothing up there. The fridge is not open. And then here it comes a second time. There it goes out and then back in. Here in the background, I want you to watch. As the dog sits down, watch the hand come in and out. There it goes again.
You can see maybe one of them sitting down, then the other maybe, but all three of them sit down at the same time and yawn. And that's basically the way people expel demons is through yawning, sighing, coughing, burping, belching, sometimes even sweating, tearing.
So the animals, the entire attitude of the dogs changed when you came in. So these people were hearing knocking and banging, and the dogs were, while you were there, the dogs were getting upset more and more when you were saying the name of Jesus.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And what I had learned afterwards was that the previous owners came from Africa, so I can only assume that maybe there was some African witchcraft going on in the house and some demons stayed behind and they were jumping in and out of the dogs, causing confusion and mayhem in the house and then jumping back in.
Funny how the aliens would be interested in our religion here or want a pure Luciferian doctrine to come forth. Those are some interesting aliens. And those aliens specifically hate Jesus Christ. And what's also funny is that you've got entire organizations that have done full studies with plethoras of evidence that just like demons, that aliens seem to find a way to cough you back into your bedroom real quick from wherever they've got you at. If you start choking out the word Jesus, you get it out of your lips, something shows up at your bed and you feel like you're in paralysis, or the thing is sitting on your chest, or you've got the little goons and this generally begins with shadow people experiences, and they'll become progressively more real. And in most all of these cases, of which I've talked to many people who've had these alien abduction experiences, things just appear right into reality, right in through the walls or right into the bedroom. Don, you feel like there's a correlation between the alien stuff in the sky and the evil spirits, the things.
Oh, sure, absolutely. If you go back and I'm not going to get into the Latin terms of demons and so forth. Like, the term actually comes back to knowledge. They're very, very smart. They're very, very intelligent, and it could be nothing for them to manifest the bodies that look like aliens. It could be nothing for them to manifest what looks like a flying saucer. There are people that claim to be abducted over and over again throughout their lifetime. I've spoken to some just recently, as a matter of fact, and what I've come to the conclusion of, and it's only common sense, no, they're not coming down there in a spaceship and they're taking them in and poking and prodding them again. What they're doing is they're inside them, and they're coming out of them and confronting them, and that's how it's being done.
Wow, that's actually a profound thought. In terms of the origin of demons, in the book of Enoch, chapter 15, starting in verse 8, it states this: "And now the giants, the Nephilim, who have been begotten from body and flesh," so this is the combination of the fallen angels, the B'nai Ha Elohim, mixed with human women, bound together to create these genetic anomalies, the giants, the Nephilim, all of the weird, monstrous madness, will be called evil spirits on the earth. So when they die, Their spirits pop out, and their dwelling places will be upon the earth. Now, this is being covered in Enoch as a realm that runs sort of parallel to ours. The verse continues, in verse 9. Evil spirits proceed from their bodies at the point that they die. Because they are created from above, their beginning being from the holy watchers. They will be evil spirits upon the earth, the demons. Enoch is actually one of 207 biblical texts that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. One thing that has to be realized in reference to the book of Enoch is that it hasn't been handled with quite the care of other texts in the Bible. And if you're dealing with what I believe you are dealing with is an authentic, or probably better stated, largely authentic document, actually written by Enoch, which would have been passed through his family line, bottom line, actually would have been on that boat and made it to your hands, it's not terribly surprising that the thing has areas of it that read a little rough. In fact, the manuscripts of it, out of the Dead Sea Scroll, you're only getting fragments. But there is one passage that people bring, at least to my attention frequently, where the text states that the giants were 3,000 ells. What that would work out to be is about 450 feet, or roughly the size of the Statue of Liberty, not dissimilar to what the Greek legend of the Clash of the Titans, talking about these mixtures of these Lord of the Ring-ish style worlds, both before and after the global flood. And actually, the Greeks were just copying the Egyptians, who were actually just copying the Assyrians, Sumerians. And in fact, all of them systematically, if you look at the teachings of the fallen angels, actually 7 of them going down that screen there that I have listed, they're going to match up identically, as if we're trying to recreate them one at a time. Notice there I stopped at 6. We're going to cover all 6 of these, including number 7 in the coming video, Entities, Rise of Technology, Genetic Abominations. At the Kraken in their Clash of the Titan movies, reaching over here to take the virgin from the locals to appease the monster god. And of course the Kraken creature, which Hollywood certainly didn't have a problem with the size of, is really just a copy of the same thing Godzilla is for the Japanese and the Chinese, going all the way back to the ancient god Dagon, and sort of a cocktail mixing of what you're reading in a lot of the occult text, blurring the lines between the pre-flood world and the world that came just after the flood. That we do strangely find animals underneath the ground that are reptilian animals, lots of them, no less, which couldn't even exist or breathe today. This includes enormous creatures, which also need enormous vegetation, which we also find under the ground. Bottom line, these things need an entirely different atmosphere and ecological system to exist at all. Here's a modern day little guy down here. This is a Brachiosaurus. And I also find it a pinch interesting that movies like the Jurassic Park franchise and series, the objective in these films is always to dabble with the genetics and make a hybrid dinosaur, or reproduce dinosaurs, or do some genetic tinkering with dinosaurs. What many scholars actually believe about that segment of text in the book of Enoch, which I personally believe too, what you've got to understand is that you're dealing with an enormously ancient text, a text that would have actually come from before that flood. And the text has, in some spots, some rough areas to it. It hasn't been handled with the utmost of absolute care. Long story short, the 3,000 L's is very likely a mistranslation. It probably actually originally read 300 L's, which would equate to about 35 feet. For your guys, it doesn't include your dinosaurs, your lizards, or whatever else weirdness may have been running loose. But in that particular segment, what it appears that Enoch was most likely stating, realistically, was something like 35 feet in our modern measurements today. In reference to the spirits of these fallen beings, these offspring of the fallen angels, saying that the spirits of heaven, of course, will have their dwelling place in the heavens, but that the spirits that were born upon the earth will be confined to the earth until the day of the final judgment, which is interesting because when Jesus runs into the demon-possessed man, the demons are immediately bringing up some kind of a time frame, that it's not our time yet. And they were extremely sensitive to this. But what you're also reading is that these things dwelling in this other realm, this realm, at least from the eyes of men, will be invisible. And in the case of these evil spirits, these demons, these wisdom beings from another realm that don't have quite your best interests at heart, they step through all sorts of little doorways that very often people don't even know that they're opening. But one of the ways that demons make entrance, the quickest, the fastest, and in the most mass, is when they are summoned, which is somewhat interesting because in Los Angeles, California, there are large groups of people that have been getting together and videotaping the entire events where they're doing the summonsing of quote-unquote UFOs or aliens. The man who is doing the summonsing is not only selling teaching sets on how you too can summons orbs, aliens, and UFOs into your own life, which, by the way, historically has always been the idea that they want communication with everyone. But more than this, what he states is when you're doing your cleaned up Hinduism, Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian rituals to get the Space Brothers to make their entrance, you need to always do it with the best of intentions, which I find a little bit funny because there's actually an old saying that says the road to hell is paved with the best of intentions. Now this right here on the screen is one of the anomalies that appeared in the sky, one of these summonsing events in Los Angeles. Now I've got to be absolutely honest with you, that doesn't look like a spaceship to me. It almost looks like a little man with legs. It's somehow up in the air. Almost looks like it's got little wings on it, on the sides there. It's the leggies right there. It's the head up here that keeps on pumping and popping through as it seems to struggle to hold its form in our material world. The people below summonsing it. A being of light. Wasn't there a scripture that says even Satan himself can appear as an angel of light? In layman's terms, what it's saying is that before the flood, prior to the flood of Noah, that these fallen angels had bound themselves into an agreement. They were not asking anyone's permission to come in and do what they were going to do. what you're seeing in texts and legends all across the earth, and all sorts of different variations and sordid little details. But in the overview of all these legends, when you read them, they are all talking about two events. Number one, the global flood. Number two, events that began prior to that flood, bottlenecked at the flood, and then after the flood you have a reemergence that begins with people actually seeking out for these entities to enter. They are calling them in and desiring them to come in. At that point, the things that are making entrance have exactly the same interest that they did prior to the flood, only now they're doing it with mankind's permission. What you're actually reading in these texts, beginning with the book of Genesis, which is the book of origins, and by the way, when dealing with the text of Genesis, this is, bar none, the most fought against text and the events that occurred there, which I do not think is by coincidence. But within that text, I would argue to anyone, the opening statement of the Bible is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If a person can grip on and understand that single opening sentence of the entire Bible, the rest of it is downhill and easy to understand from that point forward. And all of the writings that you find from all of these major cultures, as well as the writings that you're going to find from little bitty guys that are sprinkled here, there, and yonder with their own little versions of the same accounts, are going to plug in and light up like a light bulb right before your eyes. And the whole picture begins to make sense. This again I lay humbly in your hands. But what the texts are telling you, all of them, from all across the globe, even the little bitty guys who have little bitty stories that all come together like a weavework, what they're telling you is that prior to this flood, which they all cover, prior to that flood, there was some kind of a fall of mankind. The Bible's being very specific about this fall. And after this fall, some guys made entrance. They decided to do this with nobody's permission. At the point of the flood, as is also covered in the book of Jasher, which is referenced in the Bible, at the point of this flood, you've got a mass cleansing of all of these things that had come onto the planet Earth. All sorts of genetic nonsense that was going on. What you're seeing right after the point of this flood is that you have three sons of Noah. One of them is going to begin the bloodlines, the descent lines of many of your occult cultures. These are going to begin right here in Samaria, later Assyria, with your first little tower builder, Nimrod. What Nimrod is doing is he's calling in, he is beckoning in, and he's got all of his little witchy guys and his magicians and all of these people, as is extensively covered by the book of Jasher. All these little summonsers, they are dearly trying to get these demon things to come in. The same things that were prior to the flood, they are just diehard dead set that that's what they want to call in. And apparently, according to their own text, they were successful at this. And not only would they be successful, but all of these other cultures that would come would be successful as well. And the interest of the thing that they called in had not changed from its intent right on the other side of that flood. Here's the long and the short of this, according to the text, is that you've got something that is spiritual, dimensional, however you want to phrase it. Even extraterrestrial might not be a bad phrasing because it's not technically from the same place that we are, but it is alien. It is making entrance. Whatever phrasing you wish to go with, you've got something here that appears to very much wish to get a body, which from its perspective, reading it in the text from the thing's point of view appears to be a step upward. These strange beings, in their actual tangible flesh and blood form, as is covered in all of these texts, as well as the towering architecture that they are building in these texts, appears to match eerily identically with exactly the stuff that we're finding right on the ground. So this is the Fertile Crescent, this entire area right here where my hand is running. This area is actually called the cradle of civilization. This would be even what it's defined as if you were talking to the most secular university professor or atheist. And many of these people can tug a war and try and stretch the numbers out as far as they can with this stuff to get it to disagree strangely with the biblical text. But what we can't really do, or what's not really done, is we can't get around the fact that this is where your first writings, your first architecture, your first, all of it begin to sprout up. This is ancient. This is where Samaria would be, right down in here, which is not terribly far from where the boat of Noah is said to have landed. In fact, all of it's called the Fertile Crescent because this is very fertile ground in here. So this is where they were planting their first little settlements and cities, coming down right in here where the Tower of Babel was, or where I certainly believe it was, and then stretching down over this direction to where we find the towering pyramids of ancient Egypt. These right here on the screen in front of me, these are two enormous, giant human jaws. These used to be on display in the very same motel out there in Turkey where a lot of guys, when you had all sorts of guys that would go up Mount Ararat to go searching for Noah's Ark, many expeditions up there. This was the hotel where a lot of these folks would stay at. They would stay the night at. And these jaws were on display right in the lobby. That's where this photograph comes from, is right from the lobby of their hotel. These jawbones, which you could nearly stick your head through these jawbones, these are estimated to come from a 12 to 14 foot tall guys. And out in the land of Canaan, and this is current day Israel, what I've got on the screen here. So in this particular depiction, you have all of these tribes of what were giants. You have other types of tribes that were populating and sort of spreading their way up, coincidentally populating themselves largely in this particular area, like a blockade of some type, a literal minefield of strange characters that are described not just in the biblical text, but in other texts as well, as being smack dab in this area right here. Down here, you've got Egypt. That's where the Hebrews were until they came into this land and began conquering all of these little tribes of ites that you see all over the place, like little ant mounds of ites running all over the place up in here. If I were to stretch my hand over in this direction, that's where the remainder of your Fertile Crescent is, where you've got where ultimately Babylon would rise, is right over here. And these strange beings, these just giants, is what we're speaking of in this particular instance, somehow stretched into the New World. These are images here. You've got mound builders all over the United States, and you've got pyramids all over the United States. Some of these, like in Ohio, you've got the serpent mounds. But these are dotted, and these are particularly in Indian lands, like what you're seeing down there in Peru, which is in South America, and also leading up through Mexico. But down there in Peru, where Brian Forrester is, you're finding as well large pyramid builders, not dissimilar to Egypt. What you're finding in these cultures is similarities not just with the giants, not just with really tall guys, like is what is recorded in Genesis and what is recorded in Enoch and other texts as well. But this word Nephilim actually means creatures made from man. So birth from man. You're finding all sorts of weird anomalies, more of which are going to be covered in the video video entities, but just a touch of what some of these guys are. This is a skull that comes right out of Egypt. This one was recently discovered in Egypt. And of course you see this in examples of your kingship as well in Egypt. Hopping over to South America, right there where Brian Forrester is, you can see the same effects on the skull, as if, just like what he's suggesting, what I perhaps have come to believe myself, is that what you're seeing is a spreading of something that predates the local cultures that had moved in later. And you're seeing this actually not just in the architecture, but also in the actual bones that we find on the ground. In fact, I plan to do an entire video on Enoch to walk you through the symbolisms in this book. It's my view, whether a person believes these pages are authentic or not, which is not relevant to the grander scope of the Bible in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But if one were to believe that this book were authentic, as I do, lots of things that you're reading in the Bible, which are fine even without Enoch, they are certainly fine without Enoch, light up like a bulb in their symbolisms, particularly culminating when you get to the book of Revelation. In fact, there are only 3 books, from my view, in the Bible that read in a certain way, certain apocalyptic, end of days style books. Enoch from the pre-flood world, Daniel from the Old Testament, and the symbolism right from the pages of the New Testament book of Revelation. They all sort of, through my eyes, come together like a glove. What has very quickly become one of the most quoted statements by Jesus Christ comes right out of Matthew 24, a passage where they ask him, the disciples ask him in a private meeting, what will the end of the age look like? And Jesus begins by stating, see that no man deceives you. What Jesus appears to be indicating is that the largest problem surrounding like a haze the end of the age is deception. And amidst this cloud of deception is one deception that comes through of such magnitude that it's called the Great Deception. But it's within that passage of text where you get this interesting statement. So it was in the days of Noah, so also shall it be in the day of the return of the Son of Man. In the book of Enoch, the book starts, unlike certainly any other pseudepigrapha text. And, well, it begins with, these are the words of the blessing of Enoch. Blessed be the elect and righteous. Those are 2 different groups. The elect and the righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when the wicked and the godless are to be removed. Sometimes the most astounding things are hidden right in plain sight. You know, right before that final judgment in the days of Noah, of the flood. Now, Enoch was raptured up before that judgment. These words are not for my generation, that's Enoch speaking, but for a remote one, which is for to come, the last generation, on account of the elect, only mentioned mentions one group there, I write, are predicting the first and second coming of the King. For that reason, I take the text extremely seriously. The entire Bible itself is an integrated message system from outside the confines of time, space, and matter itself, culminating in prophecy that is predicting with 100% accuracy future events in advance, a self-authentication method of his message from him to you. But in truth, the weave work of prophecies that all fit together like a glove within those pages are really just a gift, a courtesy. It's the true treasure at the heart of those pages is deeper than the predictions of precision future events which come and go this day and the next in advance. Whether you're dealing with the pages of Revelation or any one of the Old Testament prophets, or I would argue the book of Enoch, the pagan texts don't have anything that even remotely comes close by light years. And I've read a lot of them. Those pages are telling you that there's a lot of doorways in this place that can look really good on the surface just before the floor drops out from under your feet. Those pages are telling you that there's only one door in this place that's going up. Thank you for watching the Nephilim bonus disc. I'm Trey Smith. God bless every last one of you on the other side of that screen. Are you still here? You're still watching the video? Well, after the video entities comes out, Exodus hopefully will be out around the time of the end of this year, 2015. No promises, that's my hope. And I think we can most definitely prove to you in this one, more than just these photos, that there is in fact a land bridge, and it's not the Sea of Reeds that the Israelites, the Israelis, crossed over, the Hebrews, but it was actually the heart of the Red Sea that they went across. And you're going to be amazed how that happened. And I think I can prove that to you. I think I can also show you who the Pharaoh was of the Exodus. I think I can prove that to you. I think we can also show you who exactly Joseph was. I think we can prove that to you. I think we can also walk you through every single one of the plagues and prove every single one of them to you. I'm Trey Smith. There's much more to come.